The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Let's begin with the lie that won't die, that our president is not one of us. He wasn't born here. He doesn't deserve to be president. In fact, he's illegitimate. He's illegally sitting in the White House. Steve McMahon's a Democratic strategist, and Richard Breck is a columnist for the Star Advertiser newspaper out in Honolulu, the city where President Obama was born. Let me start with some of this. First of all, this poll. This poll is very dramatic. It's the reason we're doing this tonight. If you think this story doesn't have legs, check this out. A new nationwide poll of Republican primary voters. Now, these are the people that really picked the president on the Republican side. Public Policy Polling, which is a Democratic-leaning organization, found that 51%, narrow majority, say President Obama was not born in the United States. Affirmative, not in confusion about this, believe he was not born here. 28% say he was born in the United States, and 21% say they're not sure. So there we go, Steve. It's an incredible thing, Steve.
It is incredible.
72% of the Republican primary voters either say he definitely wasn't born here, a majority, or another 21% say they're not sure, which is sort of playing the agnostic number. Why do they say this? Is this fighting words? Is this a game they're playing? Do they honestly, under sodium pentothal, believe that this guy somehow faked his birth announcement, somehow as a baby was snuck into the United States from Kenya or wherever else? Do they really believe this?
I think there's a certain percentage of the Republican primary base that will believe anything, any bad rumor about President Obama, including this, 31%. Of those same people believe the president's a Muslim. And what I think is interesting is the continual churning of this, and people throw it in polls, and then we end up talking about it on television shows like this, which causes those numbers probably...
Well, they don't if they do it the way we're doing it. Here's Congressman Paul Labrador and former Governor Tim Pawlenty cracking birther jokes at CPAC last weekend. I think the Republican people on the real far right are not watching us. They're watching CPAC, and this is the game they're watching. Let's listen.
I am fortunate enough to be an American citizen by birth, and I do have the birth certificate to prove it.
Now, I'm not one who questions the president's birth certificate and the existence of his birth certificate, but when you listen to his policies, don't you at least wonder what planet he's from?
Let's go to Richard out there in Honolulu. Richard, you're watching the joke-orama over there at the CPAC convention in Washington about your favorite son, your native son, or your, what do you used to say, your favorite son in politics from Hawaii. What do the people in Hawaii think when they hear these kind of yuck-yucks coming from the conservative side?
I think that people in Honolulu and definitely in Hawaii are fairly tired of it. I think the best example of that is that the legislature right now in Hawaii is considering charging $100 for people who want to take a look at the birth certificate. So they're not taking it very seriously as much of a discussion.
Well, let's take a look at Boehner here Sunday on Meet the Press. Let's listen. This is Boehner, the Speaker of the House.
It's not my job to tell the American people what to think. Our job in Washington is to listen to the American people. Having said that, the state of Hawaii has said that he was born there. That's good enough for me. The president says he's a Christian. I accept him at his word. There's a lot of information out there. People read a lot of things.
You shouldn't stand up to misinformation or stereotypes.
But I've made clear what I believe the facts are.
Mm-hmm. But is it because it weakens the president politically, it seeks to delegitimize him, that you sort of want to let it stay out there?
No. What I'm trying to do is to do my job.
Well, his job is to admit that he's one of the 28%. He's saying I'm one of the 28% of Republicans who believe he was born here legally and believe he's a Christian. I'm one of the 28%. But I'm not going to fight with that other 72% because they're a majority that had doubts about this guy.
Yeah, his job as a leader is to stand up and say what he really thinks. And he sort of says it half-heartedly, and then he sort of drags in. And the president also says he's a Christian, not a Muslim, and so I'll take him at his word on that. It's like they
I'll buy the whole bag of tricks.
These ad hominem attacks in without characterizing them as attacks. They pretend to tamp them down while at the same time raising them. And they're trying to create that seed of doubt in people's minds about whether or not the president was actually born here, whether he is legitimate, and whether or not he's a Muslim. And frankly, they know that neither is true, and they shouldn't be.
Okay, Richard, just to get the facts straight as we go along here, so nobody's misled by this program, out in Honolulu, all my information since this whole dispute began, pushed by the right, has been that the local Honolulu newspapers reported, which I didn't get this kind of announcement when I was born, most people don't, that Barack Obama was born there, and they had the birth announcements in the newspaper at the time. Is that sort of generally known that the newspapers covered his birth, and whatever documentation problems there might be, if there are any, are really irrelevant to the fact here that he was born there?
Well, Chris, back then we used to have a lot more space in the newspapers back in 1961, and we ran what was called agate type, and we got it straight from the state health department. And both newspapers at the time, the Star Bulletin and the Honolulu Advertiser, both had in their current events section the listing of people who were born during the last 2 weeks. And Barack Obama was listed as being born here in 1961.
So what could be the theory behind the far right when they push this so effectively? Is it that he was somehow born in Kenya and smuggled into the United States because it would require him getting in without documentation, or else documentation that didn't survive? I mean, what is the theory of the far right? Do you know what it is?
Well, you would have to have clouded the minds of editors in two different newspapers at the same time, because the two papers are independently operated at the time. So you would have had to subverted two newspaper editors to do that.
Well, I guess people that want to believe something, Steve, are willing to believe the whole shebang. Here's House Republican leader Eric. Now, these are smart people. Here's Cantor, again, on Meet the Press last month. They're all going on Meet the Press, but they're not coming out very clearly. Let's listen.
There are elements of this country who question the president's citizenship, who think that his birth certificate is inauthentic. Will you call that what it is, which is crazy talk?
David, you know, I mean, a lot of that has been an issue sort of generated by not only the media but others in the country.
Is somebody who brings that up just engaging in crazy talk?
Well, David, I don't think it's nice to call anyone crazy.
So why don't you just call it what it is? I feel like there's a lot of Republican leaders who don't want to go as far as to criticize those folks.
I think the president's a citizen of the United States.
Period.
Yes.
You know, the game goes on here. Let's go back and look at some more. Here's Boehner and Brian Williams earlier this year, gentlemen. I want you to watch this because the beat goes on. Here's Boehner with Brian Williams of NBC at the beginning of the year. As I said, let's listen to this one. More of this obfuscation.
The state of Hawaii has said that President Obama was born there. That's good enough for me.
Would you be willing to say that message to the 12 members in your caucus who seem to either believe otherwise or are willing to express doubt and have co-sponsored legislation along those lines?
Brian, when you come to the Congress of the United States, there are 435 of us. We're nothing more than a slice of America. And people come, regardless of party labels, they come with all kinds of beliefs and ideas. It's the melting pot of America. It's not up to me to tell them what to think.
Okay, you know what? I want to do something right now. I'm going to accuse those leaders, and they're very smart gentlemen. Cantor seems like a good guy, and, of course, Boehner seems like a good guy. Let me just say this. I hereby accuse them of collaboration. I think they're collaborating with the know-nothings out there. They're collaborating with what now believes has grown to be 51% of their party, at least primary voters, and they refuse to take them on. They said, you may have something, because they keep listening to. Why don't they just say, you guys are crazy, stop talking like this? Or unless you've got evidence that this guy was born in some other country, stop talking like this. It's not good for the party. It's a dishonesty to it's not fair to the president and his human being to be president of the United States and have people saying he's illegitimate.
Right.
Why don't they do that?
Well, actually,
do you think they're avoiding offending people? Another theory. They know this hurts the president. They know it works with the base and energizes them and convinces them they're morally right to sort of unseat this illegitimate imposter.
If you deconstruct this politically, the truth of the matter is the base that this appeals to is already voting against the president and for whomever the Republicans put up. And this kind of talk from these leaders of the Republican Party and from people running for president of the United States makes them look outside the mainstream. To an independent voter and to the people who are going to decide the 2012
election. Yeah, but you're talking, but why are they doing it then?
Well, the Republicans who are running for president are doing it because the 51% of the base
they're afraid to offend the nuts.
They're trying to get nominated, but every single time...
You can't call them nuts, it's 51%, we can't be that nutty in this country.
Every single time you get a piece of tape like that from the CPAC convention, that puts that person in a general election in a much more difficult position because most people don't believe this crazy talk. They think it's crazy talk.
Where do you see Mitt Romney on this? Because he can be a real, a mood ring for the party. I'll bet you he won't take them on.
He probably won't take them on, but it's interesting because if you look at that poll, among the people who think the president wasn't born here, Mitt Romney is their last choice, Mike Huckabee is their first choice, and Sarah Palin is their second choice. I think it tells you a little bit about mainstream Republicans that they're upside down.
No, it shows that when they see an ink spot, they see some spider coming at them. Anyway, thank you, Steve McMahon. Thank you, Richard Brecken. Thank you for coming on the show. I hope we don't need you again, sir, but we probably will.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.